You know, that the last panel, that was my cousin who was leading it. So, and now I feel like, can I compete with my cousin? Because I thought he did an extraordinary job. So welcome, everyone. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend this time talking about artificial intelligence and big data or data. And we're going to go through a few topic areas. So each topic area we'll spend about 5 to 7 minutes on. And we're going to talk to the panelists and get their view on it. And then I don't know if we have time to have some questions at the end of the panel. We'll take some questions if you guys are up for that. You're brave? Yeah?
We hope to be.
Act like you're having fun already. Smile. Okay, so the topics that we're going to talk about are the impact of AI, technology, data, personalization, competition and reaction, some examples, and maybe if we have time, negatives. That's a kind of ironic challenge to take more time so we don't have to talk about the negatives of AI. So I want to introduce in the panel, we have Saki Dodelson, representing Saki Dodelson now. Erez Tocker from Renaissance, Michal from Symbolab, and June and I rehearsed this about 30 times, and I still can't do it, so June, tell me the name of the company.
一起作业 means homework together.
Oh, I was going to do the translation. You took my part. Don't interrupt. I'm supposed to be the funny one here. Okay. So I trust everyone in the audience is well fed, overheated, all of these things, and you're ready to go. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the impact of technologies like AI and big data. And I'm going to start with a contrarian opinion. There's a famous economist named Robert Solow, who's a Nobel Prize-winning economist in the United States. And he had a famous quip about information technology. He said, "You can see the computer age everywhere, but in the productivity statistics." And that's been defined as the paradox or the discrepancy between the sort of measure of our perception of all the things that computers are doing and what we can actually measure. And in fact, it's not just Robert Solow. There's another very famous economist, Robert Gordon, who said, "Computers and the internet," he said, "do not rate as an industrial revolution, as did electricity and cars and airplanes. Much internet activity, he argues, is merely a substitute for things that are already being done. It does not create new products in the way electricity prompted the invention of vacuum cleaners and the refrigerator. Indeed, the internet can even reduce productivity in the workplace. The traffic on many consumer-oriented websites," he notes, "peaks in the middle of the working day, not in the evening." And so the question I'm asking to you, amid all of the hype of AI and big data and its impact and measure is this really different now? And I'm going to start with you, Erez, which is, has AI made an impact on education? Is it going to make something? Or is it just more hype and, Netflix versus watching TV and things like that, where it doesn't measurably change things?
Well, I think it's an interesting question at this time.
Is your mic on, or are you?
Not on?
It's okay?
Closer?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. We're talking about technology, and that's actually only the physical thing. So I think it's an interesting question at this time because education, and Professor Trachtenberg talked about that early in the opening speech about whether education was actually transformed during the different revolutions, and he said that it was transformed in the Industrial Revolution, and there's a question if that even happened. So we've got a lot of AI and a lot more technology happening now in education. And over the last few years, people said, but what is it actually doing? And the reality is that it wasn't doing much. It wasn't actually generating results. The question is if we are starting to see results now. And I think it links, and I don't know if that's what you wanted to talk about, it links also to our ability to measure those results.
So I'll ask June, and panelists, feel free to disagree with your co-panelists. You have 60 million students on your platforms?
60 million users in total, over 40 million students, and 20 million parent users, a couple of 100,000.
So who uses are the parents on more than the students, or the students on more than the parents?
So it's an ecosystem. First of all, like the teachers, they would be on board, and then teachers will naturally bring students on board, and then students will bring parents on board.
So with that large base of number, can you tell us, has that made an impact? Can you measure it? Can you see, oh, people are getting better grades or they're getting better jobs? Is there?
That's basically how our business model works. So we have a core product to digitalize the traditional homework. In a way, we collect your study data. So Renaissance, so for instance, they have the data from the actual classes. We have data from your homework. And then based on the study data, we analyze what your weaknesses and strengths are, and then we sell the premium personalized contents on top of that. So that's how we actually help certain students to make progress.
But I'm asking the question, which is, you're working with all of these students and teachers and parents and things like that. Is there an impact?
Definitely. Like, first of all, like teachers, they save a lot of time, right? So traditionally, they have to spend time in actually grading these homework. Now they can take the time out to actually study the pedagogy and things that matters in actually teaching the students, right? That's difficult to measure because it's not quantitative. But there are we did some case studies in certain schools to see where the students would actually improve their scores. But again, because it's different sets of questions, right? You can say this one is easier, that one's more complicated. So we can see clear progress of their study, but we kind of expected that already. And there are still, we're thinking of more scientific ways of doing it on a larger scale to prove that this is scientific, that,
And that's what, so Suki, I'm curious to your perspective, because you...
I feel that we saw major impact. And an impact that just makes you feel awesome every day. So we're talking about millions of kids that we have a first name and last name and how they look and what their family look like. They would not know how to read. And with the use of technology now, they did not have parents at home that could teach them how to read. They were going to school and they were 2 grades below, and now, we don't have enough teachers to give one-on-one education to our kids. And now with the use of technology, we could actually give one-on-one, we can give personalized learning, we can teach all kids wherever they are. And I'm talking about at least 9 million kids that we touch with our technology. They would not have the skills they need for tomorrow, and now they have. And if you think of each one of them, their families and their communities they're touching.
So where were these kids doing before? Were they just wandering around in the fields and now they got computers, or?
No, but we have the 30 million word gaps. So kids come to school at age 6, and some have lots of vocabulary words, some have none. And so we're starting the gap in first grade. We have 11 different reading levels in every single classroom. In the United States, we have 60% of our kids that comes to first grade 2 grades below, so they actually don't have the vocabulary words that they need. They learn to do phonics and phonemics, they learn how to decode, but they don't understand what they read. And now we're continuing the gap, and one teacher cannot teach 11 different reading levels. And the problem is at home. So the fact that they're going home at 2 o'clock, they still have, from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock, we continue to increase the gap 7 days a week, Christmas, Easter, summer, and we're not going to close the gap. We are school. School is not continuing to be until 7 o'clock. So even if you were able to close the gap at school, you're still every day. The gap between the have and have not is terrible. And with technology, we have a hope. We can teach everybody, everywhere.
Michal, I'm going to ask you, we know computers can play poker better than humans. They've won the high-stakes poker or chess or read x-rays for simple things. Is that true for education? Can computers teach kids better than teachers can?
Some things, yes. Math, absolutely. We also have 60 million users, so we can measure the impact. We can see...
We have 150 million users right here, right?
And we do not overlap, and yeah.
Good coverage of the world, absolutely. So what we see, there are different measurements. It's easy to measure grades, if their grades went up, but to us it's more important also to measure math anxiety. Did we manage to reduce math anxiety? How do you measure that? Are they more willing, the engagement, are they more willing now to learn math? So we see this very clearly with the adaptive learning and the personalization, that there's a huge difference between before we implemented that, just plain practice, and with the adaptive, that the engagement went up like, I think, 10 times. So that's things that are also important to measure. And also we get all these feedbacks that students who before just gave up on themselves are now learning engineering and math, and that's something to do with the math anxiety. Again, it's not complete measurements of that, but we're starting to measure that as well.
All right, so we're going to, thank you, those are good and interesting answers. We're going to switch to technology. And, you know, I'm old enough now to feel like every 10 years, it feels like there's some radical technology change, right? It's not, you know, people say, oh, it's so different now, but I've lived through 3 or 4 of those. But now one thing does seem different, which is that capability to analyze enormous amounts of information, to find patterns, faster computers, more scalable architectures, machine learning algorithms, and things like that. And so the thing I'm sort of curious about, so in your 60 million viewers, are there insights that you have that we didn't know before? Are there things that we now see students learn this way or not, or when it's raining? Give us something that you know now that we didn't know 10 years ago because we just didn't have access to that data.
So
I'm putting you on the spot. Just
right, yeah,
clear.
and obviously it's a good question. Actually, the company is doing a lot of things in analyzing things like that. So a couple of experiments that we've run through and we're still running now is, for instance, like, should we teach the students in a traditional way that, so just because you sit in the same class means you get the same homework? So for instance, we're disrupting the traditional homework way. We group people, right, by different capabilities, and then to see if they get different sets of homework and whether that will improve. The result is positive. So that's one aspect.
And do you know what type of homework goes to what type of student? Is there a...
So obviously, so for each content item, we would have different labels to give a few like ways of solving this problem, ways of testing, like difficult level, like different kinds of labels and concepts, right? So students would behave differently based on these different label levels, and then we group them based on the results, right, basically.
Erez, so Renaissance, I think, was founded in 1986. Probably ran on PCs and things like that.
Even before, on paper.
On abacuses. What do you do now? What can you do now that you weren't able to do before?
Yeah, that's what the question of data is a really good one, because it's what we can do now in terms of data and understanding of data and seeing patterns is a lot. There are 20 million students on our systems. Each one of them, for example, would take a STAR test 5 times a year. That's 100 million tests a year, billions of data points, and there's lots of data. And that data is really fascinating. So we know, for example, how quickly kids are progressing. We can measure where they start. We can measure where they progress. We can see how they can do things differently and progress faster. We actually have algorithms that...
So give us an example. Aside from giving them ADHD pills that we heard about before, what makes them work faster or learn better?
So in our case, it's more about being able to, as Saki said, provide children with the right level of content to their abilities. So not actually, in the old days...
So stopping them from working slower as opposed to getting them to work faster. Stopping them from working slower as opposed to getting them to work faster.
Well, in their pace. So that's one example. Another example, we get data on, because we are in the reading industry, we know what kids are reading. We also know all sorts of things that we thought previously that were a myth, for example, that girls read better than boys, and we found that
I didn't need 60 million users to tell you that.
Exactly, we all know that as parents, but now we actually found that to be a fact, right? So how do you help boys in the school to read? Because actually boys are behind. But the question in data is more about actionable data, because actually there's tons of data coming out of systems now. And there is data that is good for the company, so we know how to build products better. There is data that districts and schools need to so that they can know how they can manage. And then there's a question of what data does a teacher know? And the teachers, I fear, are bombarded with data because actually teachers need to teach and they need actionable data. So our challenge is how to take that data and make it really simple for them to understand. It's like Mobileye in your car. It has lots of data, but it only gives you very simple things because you're driving and you need to be focused on driving. Teachers need to be focused on teaching. So how do we as a company give them the right, insightful, actionable data they can work on? That's the analytics side of things.
So, Suki, one of the things I'd ask you is, do these adaptive learning systems really require big data? I mean, couldn't we do them with the sort of rule systems that we had 10 years ago? Do we need all of this? I mean, to figure out that girls read faster than boys? Like I'm pulling for what's the reality? What can you do today that you couldn't do 10 years ago?
Many, many more kids faster.
Scale.
So as a data scale, I mean, what you could do really, what we are trying to do with technology is really replicate the best teachers and replicate the time on task and replicate, and get to places that, we can't get with face-to-face. So I really think the data, besides what girls like to read more, if I need the girls to read 3 stories a day, I better give them what they like, or, what stories they like. But I think mainly is the ability to replicate. And I think that I agree with you that the biggest challenge that we have is how do we get to teachers? How do we get to parents? We think of the student as our clients, but the teachers, if they don't connect with student, it's a blended system. We need the face-to-face they need to feel that somebody cares about them. So how do we combine it?
Well, so I'm gonna pick up on that a little bit, which is, so the industry I came from before, there was enormous amount of use of big data. I think, the biggest use of big data are things like weather and particle physics, but the biggest sort of use that you see all around is what I call reverse engineering the human response system. What do I have to show you to get you to buy something, to get you to eat something, to take a vacation or things like that? It's like tricking us, right? What are we going to respond to and click on and things like that? And most of it is used for our detriment, right? It's not like Facebook is getting us to lose weight or something like that. How can we use all of this sort of big data? Can we use all of these capabilities for good? Can we make education addictive the way Facebook or Twitter is? Can we turn those things around? And so, June, I'll ask you the first thing, like, what can we do? Can we make that data work in a positive way to protect us and to make us want to learn as opposed to want to buy something on Amazon?
The answer is yes. So based on the data, it's not only for use to detecting your weakness and strengths to give you personalized recommendation, but also we will be able to understand your preferences, right? Like you prefer videos, for instance, than the actual words reading, or like some people like gamification much better, or some people like competing with others. So there are like data on products, not just on the content items, right? And we also understand the preferences of teachers. So for instance, some teachers would prefer to assign like 20 questions per day. Some teachers prefer 100. It's heavy in China, by the way. And some teachers like more difficult questions. Some teachers prefer to focus on a very niche area that he has taught today, not to cover everything. So we will be able to understand the preferences in order to incentivize them to, use it better.
But so I guess the question I'm asking is, if it were really addictive, we wouldn't need the teachers to, right? It'd be the kids, like we'd have mothers yelling at kids, hey, get off that computer course. I don't want you learning so much, go out and play Frisbee or something
That's actually an issue for us.
You do have that.
That's actually an issue for us. Actually, we heard of a lot of complaints from parents saying that, like, do you have any methodology to protect the eyesight of our kids because they spend too much time on your screen? So things like that. So because of that big data, you will be able, to find a way to retain them on the platform.
Erez, I'm curious, can you detect who's going to have problems early? I know that intervention is one of the really important things in school. Suki's been talking about this. How early can you say, hey, this is someone who needs special attention, we've got to do something different?
After 20 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. So again, because of the data, and we were talking about actionable data before, because of the data, and because that data has been normalized over large volumes of populations and items, then we can know really quickly when a student takes an adaptive test. We can know how that student is, where their level is compared to their peers for the same, not just year, but also the month they were born for the same population. So we can know that. And after 2 months, they'll take another test and we'll see their progression. So actually, you'll be able to detect very early on if there is a particular problem. We can also correlate to data that we are given access to by ministries of education, for example, and see how kids on school meals, meaning they have low household income, performing versus other kids. We can see attendance, and we can see various other things.
Do you see kids on your platform doing better than kids who don't use that platform? Can you make that statement?
Yes, we can measure that. So we can
but you're making that statement.
Sorry?
You're making that statement here and
Yeah,
now.
absolutely, yes. We can see
the Renaissance Pledge.
Definitely. I mean, we have data. It's not just us. Our data is being used by researchers in universities to do data research on, and they validate the fact that, using good tools, including Renaissance, but there are all sorts of other tools. There are Achieve 3000 and others. If you use those tools with efficacy, you get progression for sure. And you do that by knowing exactly where a child is, what the problem is for the child, if there is a problem, and how to progress that. Now, for that, we need teachers as well, and we need other tools, but there are definitely methodologies to do that, and we can see the data. It's actionable data.
Michal, I'm going to ask you a question. Math is one of these things, and you go to your website, I got like fantasies of being back in college, calculus and things like that, where the right answer isn't necessarily as important as how you get there. Does your system have a way, does it measure how people got an answer? Does it look at the creative different ways that people solve it, or are you just focused on did they get to the right answer?
Currently, we're not focused if they got to the right answer. We're focused on teaching them and helping them how to get to the right answer. We're also supporting different methods because there is more than one way to get to the right answer. So we're allowing them to choose different ways, different methods.
And do you have, is there a hierarchy to those methods? Are there some you consider better than the others, or?
There are methods that are optimized, so to speak, that are more efficient, but there is no right or wrong. If you get to the right answer, again, math is...
There's no right or wrong if you get to the right answer.
Yeah, if you got there. Math is built of layers. And the whole idea is to take complex problems and make them smaller and get to something that we already know or familiar with. And different kids and students look at things differently. So there is no better way.
That's great. That's a great answer. So I'm going to switch now to sort of the industry reaction and the competition around the industry reaction. In my sort of year and a half now in the EdTech space, it feels like their universities are very slow moving. They're inertially driven and not necessarily equipped to sort of race into the 21st century. They're purposely designed to move slowly, right? You have an institution, you want it to sort of perpetuate itself. And as content gets unbundled and things get unhinged, I don't understand if they're going to be able to compete. So Saki, what should universities do to prepare themselves? What should they do to not be left by commercial companies like all of yours who are going to find better ways to learn and optimize those experiences?
I think you said something as you were speaking. It depends what's their goal. If their goal is to continue to make a lot of money and have kids stay there for a long time and have some kids drop out and still get paid, then they're doing a great job.
That's a good goal.
Then why should they change? So I really think it's important to understand what's their goal.
Well, they should change because there's so much competition that didn't exist. As you said, there are distribution mechanisms for education now, and so they're going to find themselves where students are not necessarily going to want to pay whatever it costs to go to university, or governments won't subsidize what it costs if there are cheaper and more effective ways.
Right. That's awesome. It's a new rule and it's awesome. So they actually are getting paid now according to graduation. Third is according to graduation. So I don't know if you watched the University of South New Hampshire, Ray McNulty. I mean, they're doing an awesome job. I think they went from not making money to being one of the largest universities. So yes, you have to think of what I like, you know, how I am
But so
learning.
what did they do to, I mean, they sort of were grown up, but if you're University of Chicago or you know, Hebrew University, what should you be doing now to prepare yourself for all of this?
Probably I wouldn't say something nice. So first they have to lower their ego and really go out there and find out, you know, what the challenge is, because I think it's working for some, but not for many. And I think that we really do have to allow people to, you know, learn where they are, you know, where they are, what they want, and then have it blended off face-to-face and online.
Erez, one of my favorite quotes in all of business is Jim Barksdale was the founder of Netscape and Silicon Graphics alum, and he said, all businesses are either bundling or unbundling. In other words, you either unbundle something that's bundled or you bundle something that's been unbundled. What's going to happen is, are schools going to get unbundled, and what are those new unbundlers and rebundlers going to look like?
Very good question. So
You like my questions, don't you?
Yeah,
We're doing
that's, maybe I'm just, you know, that's something to think about, but maybe they're unbundling already, because if schools previously held everything and they start to actually open up to publishers years ago, even before technology, and hand over, you know, content creation to others, there's already a movement to unbundle some services. We also know that some services in the school itself are being unbundled, right? So we're not talking only about teaching. School management requires other things. So I would guess it probably goes towards unbundling. That's the question.
Could you see if a school district said, you know, June, take it over? Would you?
Well, I have a slightly different opinion than his. So, for instance, we are actually bundling services. The company I represent actually have dealt with a lot of traditional institutions in China. Some of them would not adopt, you know, our current way of working. Like, so for instance, the schools insist that all the students do their homework on paper instead of using the digitalized content. So how do we do that? We use other types of technology that they would be willing to accept. So for instance, there are technologies of handwriting recognition. So okay, you still do it on paper, but I'll be able to find a way to help you, right? To transform those digits. And I will find other solutions of, like, for instance, like machines who can actually solve math problems to help the teachers, you know, grade these questions. So in a way, even if there are a lot of schools, you know, kind of unwilling to embrace the current technology, you can work with them in a traditional way. Yeah.
Michal, are schools in the way? Are they partners to you? Are they orthogonal? What's your take on this?
I wouldn't say that they're in the way, but what we're seeing and what's interesting is our 60 million users are not coming through schools. They just get to Symbolab because there is a need. So the reason schools need to unbundle is there is less reasoning behind the standard education. We don't need the information flow from teachers to kids anymore. It's not interesting. There is a huge gap. Kids are getting it online already better, and they know better than the teachers. So if they don't change, they don't collaborate, they don't open up also big data and allow other companies to use it and to collaborate, I'm not sure where schools will be in like 5 to 10 years.
So we have only a little bit of time left. I'm going to ask you a question. We've seen a lot of big platforms go into different businesses, right? Facebook just went into the dating business. Apple's making movies. Google's making cars. Yes or no answer. Are you guys scared of those companies? Are you scared of, you know, Google announcing that they're going to do adaptive learning companies or things like that?
Kind of expected it, because I think great companies, they don't just serve as one purpose. They cover your whole lifestyle. It's
so
like, yeah.
Worried, not worried?
Not worried.
Yes and no. The good news is they already know everything about us. The bad news is that they already know everything about us. So,
Erez?
No, I don't think we're scared, because I think that the education industry is quite big, wide, and it requires an ecosystem of companies to work together, and those companies can contribute towards that ecosystem. Each one of us here does something really good, and we should focus on that, and it's not going to be a closed environment. Maybe going to the unbundling question, it's not going to be just one institution or one company doing everything. We're all going to contribute to that cause.
Suki, last word?
I love that. I can't wait. I mean, Google, Facebook, they should all think of education, and if we could fix education, we'll be in a better place. So I'm all for it.
Terrific. Thank you very much. You guys did a fantastic job.
Thank you.